Hello and welcome to this Tuesday's morning market briefing. We've got a lot to talk about, but firstly, Rishi Sunak says lower inflation has opened way to UK tax cuts, as well as that majority of OpenAI staff do threaten to quit unless Sam Altman is reinstated. We've got lots to talk about on the charts also, with lots happening on the economic calendar. But we'll come to that near the end, so make sure you stay around to see that. But before we get straight into it, make sure to subscribe. But yeah, the first article to talk about is Rishi Sunak. Now, Rishi Sunak has promised to start cutting taxes in the lead up to this week's budget. Now, this comes as the battle lines are drawn for the next UK general election in 2024. Now, this is a topic that we've been, covering as it's progressing. As you know, we have been seeing those battle lines be drawn by both sides, by both political parties within the UK. And, the budget, which is coming up this week, this Wednesday, so tomorrow, is very, very significant going into next year's election year, primarily because this is where we'll see and hear, the Conservatives' economic policy basically laid out going into election year. Now, we know that Rishi Sunak's trying to brand kind of his form of the Conservative Party at the moment as more of a change, kind of conservative, trying to move away from the history of the Conservative Party within the past 13 years. And, he's trying to kind of create this kind of new era, which he is now laying out. And so this kind of budget will be important to kind of understand how those changes will be made, especially on the economic front, as we do understand that the UK has been experiencing, obviously, the worldwide, cost of living issues as a result of higher levels of inflation coming out of COVID and the geopolitical issues which followed. And, seeing how Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt, of course, who will present the economic policy agenda, lays out these plans, this is what will be very important to hear, understanding what's to come, basically. But with the PM, so Rishi Sunak, raising hopes for new cuts to personal taxation in a sustainable manner. And that's the key thing that we have been hearing, is this kind of sustainable manner in reference to, cutting taxes. After all, there has been this issue of inflation, as we spoke about. But, with that, any tax cuts could help push, greater levels of inflation. And that's why, whenever, tax cuts are made in times of, kind of high inflation, worries do begin to spread over whether this will add to the inflationary pressure, but more so on the demand side. And so this is something that obviously Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak have to manage, as they don't want to impede on, the Bank of England's job already to bring down inflation. We understand that that's now, met the target which Rishi Sunak laid out for, halving inflation. So that target's been met. But, any kind of threat to that by, lowering taxes and increasing consumption as a result, obviously will then be blamed on, the Conservative Party. Now, Tory MPs want Hunt to cut income tax or national insurance rate in the budget. Now, Sunak has said also that the latest official data showed that inflation was under control. And that's what we were talking about, a week or two ago, in reference to inflation kind of coming in below that expectation, and also meeting Rishi Sunak's kind of demands for halving inflation. Now, some believe Hunt will cut welfare and reduce taxes for working people in an effort to kind of divide the line between the two parties. As somewhat there's been a kind of consensus within the past few years in relation to Labour and Tory economic policy. Obviously, we've heard more of that kind of green agenda from the Labour Party, and that's what we're continuing to see now. But the Treasury has declined to comment on tax cuts, and Sunak last year, however, did talk of cutting the basic rate of income tax from 20p to 19p in the pound in 2024, and this would be the lowest rate of tax, of course. So kind of making sure he's making those tax cuts, but once again positioning those tax cuts towards the new kind of conservative voters, which are more of those working class populations that were, claimed from the Red Wall following, the Brexit referendum and the elections which followed, with the ONS data last week showing inflation had slowed more sharply than expected, all the way to 4.6%. Now, there's been high inflation across all economies, really, but the UK has struggled in particular, of course, with it, reaching levels nearing, like 10% and that sort of thing. And so to achieve this 4.6%, inflation rate is, what Rishi Sunak would term as a big achievement. And so it will be interesting to see how he can now kind of use his progress on the inflation rate that was high worldwide to his benefit going into the election year, or in fact, the high inflation period, which, the UK economy did sustain, maybe that does kind of stain the mouth of many voters, and therefore, they're kind of discouraged from voting for Rishi Sunak. So keep your eyes on that. Now, Sunak also did attack the Labour policy in an effort to draw, those battle lines, with, him attacking the Labour policy of investing in 28 billion a year in green projects, saying there was no way that could be afforded whilst cutting taxes, thus requiring borrowing money. And, the Hunt Chancellor of the Exchequer kind of leadership that we have seen has been very anti-borrowing, really. We did experience that high level of borrowing actually, by Rishi Sunak during the period of COVID, obviously with the policies that were implemented. And following that, we've seen Jeremy Hunt try and implement a kind of policy of austerity, almost, low borrowing, low spending kind of policies to, kind of fix this issue. And what, Rishi Sunak's kind of highlighting here is, if, the Labour government wants to bring down taxes for working people, but they also want to invest in these, extraordinarily expensive green projects, then ultimately that money's going to have to come from somewhere, and that's going to further damage, the UK's credit rating with further borrowing and, deepening the actual deficit of the UK. So that's what he's trying to highlight there. But Sunak showed that he was not a market fundamentalist during COVID, where he did implement a job support furlough scheme, but he did say that he did not want a permanently bigger government. So he's trying to, look back at that time as, a really extraordinary period, which it was, in explanation for why, there was such a large government presence within markets, welfare and that sort of thing during that time. Also saying the path of prosperity lies not in ever more government intervention, but in creating the conditions for businesses to thrive. A manufacturing plant on Wednesday is also expected following the £4.5 billion that were announced last week by Jeremy Hunt. So keep your eyes and ears on that. But that's all to talk about in reference to this article. Keep your eyes on it going into the autumn statement tomorrow. That will be very important to listen to and understand. But next talk about is the majority of OpenAI staff threatening to quit unless Sam Altman is reinstated. Now, a staff revolt at OpenAI has put pressure on directors at the world's leading artificial intelligence company to bring back ousted chief executive Sam Altman. And this comes obviously following Sam Altman being removed in a botched boardroom coup. And this is something that we spoke about yesterday quite significantly, the main topic of discussion yesterday. And this was, over the same kind of topic. We were talking about how, employees were looking to leverage their positions within the company to bring back Sam Altman, which is seen, by many within the AI industry as kind of the de facto leader. He is leading the way in, talking to regulators, presidents, prime ministers, on the topic of, AI and, the whole new industry which has come out of that generative AI industry. And, we have seen mass support for Sam Altman, not only from the employees, but also from venture capitalist kind of investors, which obviously have made up a large number of investments within, OpenAI and ChatGPT now. And therefore, we are possibly going to see that kind of leverage now be used to reinstate Sam Altman. With 500 of the OpenAI 770 employees signing a letter saying that the directors had undermined our mission and company by the way they fired Altman and his co-founder. So, making a clear kind of statement on how the board had basically acted in a very undemocratic matter, undermining the entire reason why so many employees work there, their entire belief system, their entire philosophy, what the company is really founded on, by the way that they fired Altman. His co-founder Brockman has also now been hired by Microsoft to head a new AI unit, and Altman is demanding the board resign as a price for his return. And this is a really significant moment, obviously creating some market instability, of course, with if the board being entirely if the board resigns entirely, that will obviously have great effects on the future of ChatGPT and OpenAI. So that's why it'd be so interesting to see how this plays out, as understanding who might take OpenAI forward will be very important. Now, one board member, the hundreds of OpenAI staff who have already signed the letter have been offered positions at the same unit at Microsoft, which Brockman has joined, with one board member already apologizing for his role in firing Altman, leaving the three others still, which are leading the board against Sam Altman. So it's kind of the tyranny of the minority that we are seeing within the OpenAI situation. And the fact that one board member has also already apologized and moved over onto Altman's side, it'll be interesting to see how this kind of develops. With Altman posting on X, obviously formerly Twitter, yesterday, saying we have more unity and commitment and focus than ever before, with some of OpenAI's biggest investors having also been holding out in a hope that Altman does return, as he is kind of the leading face of the industry, and so the venture capitalists are kind of hoping for his return. With OpenAI's release of ChatGPT a year ago kickstarting the investment boom into the industry, with this creating dozens of startups using generative AI to respond to text, image and audio prompts, with Sam's ousting, according to reports, seemingly being caused by a lack of control that the board were able to maintain over Sam, with them not trusting anymore what he said. As we did talk about yesterday, how Sam was meeting with kind of investors in relation to actually creating a new microchip company, which would rival those already existing, and this was also fueling the fire, which was creating fear for company executives and board executives, with Microsoft having already committed more than $10 billion in capital and infrastructure credits to OpenAI, with Microsoft shares regaining 2% on Monday, reversing losses following the firing. And we'll come to the charts in relation to Microsoft in just a second. That's all to talk about for the articles. Next to talk about, of course, is the charts. And the first kind of asset to highlight being, of course, US indices. Now, going into this week, we were highlighting how, the US 30 was sitting around this area of liquidity and resistance, and had failed to make any significant moves to the upside following hitting that strong area of resistance, and was almost consolidating. But it does seem, going into this week, yesterday, we did find the liquidity required for price to break above that area of resistance, as we have highlighted here, break out of that structure of consolidation and move higher still. And now we are seeing the product of that as price does continue higher. Now, as for where price might encounter next, we could be looking at all the way up until these levels around here, before price once again does stagnate, as this is kind of the price language, well, not language, but kind of the price history and price patterns that we have been seeing on the US 30 in particular, in relation to how price has been moving, with, as you can see here, price making that move to the upside, then consolidating for some period and then breaking higher further, and now we're experiencing that consolidation again and now move higher again. So it'll be interesting to see whether price will now reach this next area of liquidity and potential resistance. So keep your eyes on this, of course. Next to talk about though is the dollar, which, going into this week, we had spoken about how price had broken below this area of structure, this area of support, which had been tested 3 times going into after moving lower following US inflation data, signaling a more likely dovish response from the Fed. That kind of movement to the downside did see price interact with that liquidity level. But going into this week, we had broken just below that level, and now going into yesterday, and throughout yesterday, does seem that price was able to make its way down to that Fibonacci extension level of minus 27.2%. But interestingly enough, I've just noticed this, we sort of are forming an almost bullish divergence now on the dollar. So look out for this, as we're making lower lows, but on the RSI we're making higher lows. So keep your eyes on this. It'll be interesting to see how the dollar plays out after reaching this Fibonacci extension level. Next, talk about though on the same topic of the dollar. Following the pattern of the dollar, of course, Euro USD has also tapped that bullish Fibonacci extension level after failing to even tap the 38.2% Fibonacci level or any of these other areas of liquidities. Sorry, I'm tired. And it has tapped now that minus 27.2% Fibonacci area. So it'll be interesting to see how now price will continue to act. After all, we are also seeing that bearish divergence shape up on Euro USD. So quite possibly we've got a reversal incoming for Euro USD, as it is very, very overbought after, that's very, very significant bullish momentum that we have seen on Euro USD. So keep your eyes on that. Next talk about though is pound yen, which has now tapped this lower level of liquidity. Going into this week, we had highlighted how on Friday, price had tapped that 78.60 Fibonacci area. And so we were, sort of expecting, possibly a continuation of a move to the upside. However, I did highlight yesterday how this price action up here that we did see, following, such significant moves to the upside, was really, signaling a kind of bearish reversal. And quite possibly that is what we are seeing right now with, that failure to move higher following tapping that 78.60 level, and now price coming all the way down to tap that other area of liquidity, which, forms the bottom of the range as seen during this period at the start of November. And so price has now tapped that level. The question is, will price now continue higher, or in fact are we now going to continue a kind of movement to the downside or something like that? So keep your eyes on this. Next talk about though is gold, which has now started to kind of take a move to the downside after tapping that 78.60 level on Friday of last week. Quite possibly we're just experiencing another kind of retracement, as we can see here, that kind of, we're already starting to make a move again to the upside. So keep your eyes on whether price breaks below this kind of level down here, around 1955, as this is the area of the most previous low. So keep your eyes on that. Next talk about though is Microsoft, of course, in reference to OpenAI. So we are seeing Microsoft make those gains now, following the likelihood of Sam Altman returning, increasing. So keep your eyes on Microsoft in relation to OpenAI. Lastly, to talk about though is Brent crude oil, which is seemingly defying all the Fibonacci levels and continuing to push higher. However, now it is reacting to this liquidity level that we've had highlighted for some time, around the $83 a barrel mark. It's tapping that 78.60 Fibonacci area and having a bearish reaction from that as well. Watch Brent crude oil to see how it moves and reacts to this level, as this will be significant to determining where price could go. Obviously, if price does now break above this most recent high, then price could be reversing in its price action and could continue higher. We could also be looking at a formation of a head and shoulders pattern, as we can see here. One shoulder, the kind of base, head, and then base again, and then possible shoulder maybe down here or down here before moving higher. So keep your eyes on a possible reversal or continuation to the downside for Brent crude oil. Lastly to talk about, though, of course, is the economic calendar, with quite little data actually coming out today. I had to catch myself there because not too much data really is coming out today. We do have that budget statement by the British government tomorrow, as we spoke about with the articles. But what's coming up today includes the Canadian balance of trade, Swiss balance of trade. Sorry, I've put that down wrong. Swiss balance of trade, as well as that we do have British public sector borrowing that will be affecting gilt yields and that sort of thing in pound, of course, as well as that we do have the Canadian inflation rate, so keep your eyes on that if you're trading any CAD pairs, as well as that we will have the ECB's President Lagarde's speech, so listen out for that to understand more about the ECB's monetary policy. And finally, we do have FOMC minutes, so some data coming out today, and the bit of data that is coming out is important to keep your eyes on and ears listening out for. But that's all to talk about on the charts, that's all to talk about on the economic calendar, and we've covered a lot on the articles as well. But that's all from us at Wildwood Capital. Hope you have a great trading day, but that's all from us. See you later. Bye.